Your guy looks like he's about ready to file for divorce from that carrier. I looked up. A woman in her 40s wearing a sweater covered in cats. I'm not kidding. Actual embroidered cats on the sleeve, sat 2 chairs down from me, staring at my cat like he'd just lost a court case. Oscar really did look pathetic. He was pressed against the back wall of the carrier, ears flat against his head, making a sound I could only describe as a cross between a siren and an insulted violin. "He just hates the car," I said. 20 minutes on the road and he decides I'm kidnapping him. "And this one," she nodded at the fluffy tangle of energy by her feet, currently trying to chew a hole through the clinic floor, "this is Duke, 3 months old, golden retriever. And ever since he showed up at the house, my cat Murphy's declared a full boycott." "A boycott?" "Total. Won't eat in front of me, won't sit in his spot on the couch anymore. Yesterday I caught him just staring at me from the top shelf of the closet, like a general planning a counteroffensive." I laughed for the first time honestly, I couldn't remember the last time I'd laughed in a room that smelled like disinfectant and dog panic. "So you're here because of a jealous cat?" "I'm here because the vet said, bring him in, let's rule out anything medical before we book him with an animal behaviorist." Yeah, that's a real job. I Googled it. Right on cue, Duke lunged toward my carrier, and Oscar let out a sound that had to be violating someone's civil rights, even if that someone was a cat. "Easy, easy," the woman said, tugging the leash, and the dog sat, panting hard, mouth stretched into that dumb, shameless puppy grin that doesn't apologize for anything. Sorry, he hasn't figured out yet that not every creature wants to be his friend. Oscar didn't know that either when I first brought him home. Hid behind the washing machine for 3 weeks, only came out at night, only ate while I was asleep. And now? Now he sleeps on my chest and wakes me up at 6 in the morning by poking my nose with his paw. Progress. She tilted her head, studying me a beat longer than the hallway small talk really called for. "You get him recently?" "6 months ago." I hadn't planned on explaining why, but something in the way she asked, not out of curiosity, more like she actually wanted the answer, loosened my tongue faster than I meant it to. "My wife passed last year. The house—" I searched for the word. "The house got real quiet. I'm not the type to talk to empty rooms, so I figured the least I could do was get something in there that'd meow back." She didn't say, "I'm sorry." I appreciated that. People always say, "I'm sorry," like it's their fault, and then you end up comforting them instead of the other way around. Instead, she just nodded, like I'd explained some routine technical detail, and not the hardest year of my life. "Smart strategy," she said. "I teach biology at the high school, and trust me, mammals are social animals for a reason. We need a heartbeat nearby. Doesn't much matter whose." "You always analyze people like that, through a biology lens?" "Only when they show up at the vet with a terrified cat at 4 in the afternoon on a Thursday instead of being at work. I'm an accountant, flexible hours, and a client who canceled on me. And I'm a teacher, and my last class let out at 3, so technically I should be somewhere grading tests right now, but Duke decided today was the perfect day for a nervous breakdown." The exam room door opened, and a woman walked out with a carrier making a sound somewhere between meowing and outright threats. The vet tech, a girl in her 20s with a badge that said Emily, poked her head into the hallway. "Oscar Hale?" I stood, pulling the carrier close to my chest. Oscar immediately went silent, like he sensed the fight was moving to its final round and decided to save his strength. "That's me." Well, that's him. Janet, I still didn't even know her name yet, she'd only said it a minute earlier, telling Duke to sit, gave a little wave. "Good luck with the divorce." "Thanks," hoping for a merciful judge. I walked into the exam room, and while the vet checked Oscar's ears, listened to his heart, pressed on his stomach hard enough to make him yowl in outrage, I kept thinking about how ridiculous it would sound if I told anyone at home. Today, I met a woman in a vet clinic hallway, and she made me laugh for real for the first time in a year. There's no one home to tell, though. Just Oscar, currently licking his paw indignantly on the kitchen counter, which he is strictly forbidden from climbing on. "Healthy as a horse," the vet said, giving Oscar a pat on the back. "Just a difficult passenger." I walked back out into the hallway with the carrier, hoping, without quite admitting it to myself, to catch one more glimpse of that cat sweater. But the bench was empty. Duke and Janet were already gone. Only on the seat where she'd been sitting was a forgotten glove, embroidered with the same cats as the ones on her sleeve. I only found the glove once I got home, shaking out the appointment receipt from my jacket pocket. It fell to the floor, small, black, with those embroidered cats that now somehow struck me as funnier than they had an hour earlier. Emily at the front desk said she wasn't allowed to give out client numbers. "Privacy policy," she explained, in the tone of someone reciting that line for the 5th time that day. So the glove stayed sitting on the table by my front door, like evidence of a crime I had no intention of solving. 2 weeks went by. Oscar started digging again, figuratively, since what he was actually doing was clawing up my one decent couch, and I booked a follow-up over some nonsense with his ear that turned out to be nothing more than excess wax. And there I was, back in the same hallway, when the door opened and a golden whirlwind of energy came bursting in on a leash, followed by her. "You have got to be kidding me," Janet said, spotting me. "This is officially a conspiracy." "I'm starting to suspect the clinic's staging this," I said. "Maybe they pay us for the extra footage." She sat down next to me, and Duke immediately stretched his nose towards Oscar's carrier, earning an irritated hiss through the bars in return. "He still hates you," I said, nodding at the cat. "He doesn't hate me. He ignores me. That's worse. Yesterday I brought him a new can of food, premium tuna, and he sniffed it, looked me dead in the eye, and walked away. Not a sound. That might be the most thoroughly I've ever been rejected by anyone in my life." "Maybe try not changing everything all at once," I said. "He's not against Duke. He's against the fact that his whole world got rearranged overnight without any warning." Janet gave me that same narrowed look from last time. Is that the accountant talking, or someone who's also had their world renovated without warning? I huffed out a laugh. She knew how to land a hit without even winding up. "Just an observation. Oscar spent the first month pretending I didn't exist either. What helped? Time. And I stopped trying to force him to love me, just kept moving his food bowl a little closer to me every day, an inch at a time. Within a week, he was eating a few feet away. Within 2, he was on the couch next to me." She pulled out her phone and, without asking permission, started typing something. "Are you taking notes on my advice? I'm a teacher. I write down anything that sounds smarter than the animal behavior textbook." We talked the whole time we waited, about Duke chewing through baseboards, about Murphy refusing to sleep anywhere but on her sweaters, about some ridiculous incident at parent-teacher night where one dad tried to argue that evolution was just a theory and she'd nearly quit on the spot. When Emily called out Duke Price, Janet got up so reluctantly it was like class had just getting good right as the bell rang early. "See you in the hallway," she said. "It's an official tradition now." The third meeting happened on its own, no plan involved, 2 weeks later, and this time it wasn't a carrier or a leash that brought it about. It was a Tuesday, close to midnight. I was lying in bed, scrolling through my phone when it rang. Unknown number. "Patrick, it's Janet. I'm sorry it's so late. Her voice was shaking, like she was trying to sound calm and couldn't quite manage it. Duke's thrown up 3 times in the last hour. He won't get up, and I don't know if this is serious or if he ate something he shouldn't have on our walk. And the clinic's closed till 8, and the emergency vet line says 40 minutes, and I'm already getting dressed. What? I'll come. Not because I know the first thing about dogs, but because waiting 40 minutes alone with the panic is worse than waiting 40 minutes with someone else there. There was a pause on the other end, so brief I might have missed it if I hadn't been listening so closely. You don't even know where I live. Then give me the address while I go find my car keys. She rattled off a street in the West Des Moines area, and I was already at the door, one arm halfway into my jacket, phone pressed to my ear with the other hand, when I heard her say quietly, almost to herself, but just loud enough for me to catch, "Thank you for not saying, 'Call your vet.'" I didn't get the chance to answer. She'd already hung up, because Duke, judging by the sound in the background, had just decided the couch was the ideal spot for round 2. 20 minutes past midnight, I stood in front of a house I'd never seen before in my life, thinking about how ridiculous this must look from the outside. A guy in a hastily thrown-on jacket, sleep still creased into the back of his hair, showing up to save a dog when his grasp of veterinary medicine was roughly equal to his grasp of ballet. The door opened before I even got the chance to knock. Janet stood there in pajama pants and a sweater turned inside out. I noticed the seam on the shoulder, phone wedged between her ear and shoulder, trying to hold on to Duke at the same time, who lay limp on the entryway floor like a rag doll. "No, I understand it's not technically an emergency," she was saying to the phone, voice trembling, "but he's thrown up 4 times now, and She spotted me and froze for a second, like she'd forgotten she'd called me specifically because she needed me to show up. "It's the emergency vet line," she whispered, cupping her mic over the mic. "They're telling me to wait. Ask if there's any sign he swallowed something, a piece of a toy, a bone, a sock." She looked at me surprised. "How did you—" "I don't know," I shrugged. "Logical guess. There's a chewed-up corner of a rug in your kitchen. I saw it walking in." She glanced toward the kitchen, then back at me, then started talking into the phone again, a different tone now, more specific, mentioning a rope toy Duke had been dragging around the house for the last 2 days that had mysteriously gone missing today. 15 minutes later, the dispatcher told us exactly what we'd both been dreading: possible obstruction, needed to get him to the 24-hour clinic across town immediately. I scooped Duke up into my arms, heavier than he looked and weaker than he had any business being at 3 months old, and carried him to the car, while Janet scrambled between grabbing her keys, her wallet, and the leash all at once, and ended up remembering nothing but the wallet. "Get in the back with him," I said. "I'll drive." The whole way there, she stroked Duke's head and talked to him in the kind of voice that had probably once calmed down terrified students before a test. Steady, warm, nothing like the shaking voice from 10 minutes earlier on the phone. "Hang in there, big guy. Hang in there. Almost there." I kept my eyes on the road, but out of the corner of my eye, I caught her glancing up at me in the rearview mirror again and again, like she was checking whether I was really there, or whether this was all some panic-fueled dream. "Thank you," she said at one point, quiet, almost under her breath. "I mean it, really. I didn't have anyone else to call at this hour." "What about your parents? A sister? Friends?" "Everyone's asleep. Everyone's hundreds of miles away, or they'd say, 'It's just a dog, calm down.' You're the only one who just said, 'I'm already getting dressed.'" I didn't say anything back, because the truth was, for the last 2 weeks, I hadn't fully understood myself why I'd started looking forward to our accidental run-ins in that hallway the same way I used to look forward to Fridays at work. At the clinic, things turned out to be less dire than they'd sounded over the phone. A piece of the rope was lodged, but not critically. The vet gave him something that brought on one last controlled wave of vomiting, and within the hour, the dog was lying on the exam table, tired but alive, thumping his tail every time Janet leaned over him. We walked out of the clinic at 3 in the morning. The sky over the parking lot was black, with the kind of rare stars that only manage to punch through city light at the hour when the whole of Des Moines is asleep. "You didn't even know what to do," she said, as we stood by the car, Duke asleep in the back seat, curled into a ball. "This whole time." "I didn't," I admitted. "But you came." "I came." She looked at me longer than a simple thank you really called for, and I saw something in that look I hadn't seen once in 6 months. Not pity, not politeness, but something closer to recognition, like she wasn't looking at a guy who'd shown up at midnight, but at someone she'd already known longer than 3 chance meetings in a hallway. "Murphy would recognize you too," she said suddenly. "You know why? Because you're the kind of person who moves the food bowl an inch closer every day, doesn't force it, just waits for people to come around." I didn't know how to respond to that, so I just opened the car door for her. The following week, cleaning out my fridge, I found an extra can of puppy food, bought the same day we'd driven back from the clinic, just in case, I'd told myself at the time, even though I didn't have a puppy of my own. The can's still sitting there, on the bottom shelf, next to the milk and yesterday's leftovers. Not because I'm the planning type, or the stock-up-just-in-case type, but because there's a small chance, not today, not tomorrow, but some ordinary Tuesday, that she'll swing by on her way home from work, Duke on his leash, and say something like, "You wouldn't happen to have any puppy food, would you?" And I'll be able to answer without even getting up. Bottom shelf, already handled. The phone rang 2 days later. Her name on the screen. "Everything okay with Duke?" I asked instead of hello. "Everything's fine." Her voice was light, almost smiling. "Healthy, mouthy, just tried to steal a sock right off my foot." She went quiet for a second, and when she spoke again, her tone had shifted into something carefully playful. "I'm baking a pie. Apple, my grandmother's recipe, with cinnamon and this caramel top that makes the neighbors start knocking on the door pretending they just happened to stop by to say hi." "Sounds delicious," I said. "It is delicious," she laughed into the phone. "And I was thinking, you don't happen to have plans Saturday, do you?" "I don't have plans even for next year," I couldn't help but smile. "Then come for dinner," she said, talking faster now, like she was afraid I'd change my mind before she finished the sentence. "Nothing fancy, chicken, some vegetables, and that same pie for dessert. You can bring Oscar, too, if he can survive a rematch with Duke without a nervous breakdown." "Oscar survived a divorce from a pet carrier," I said. "He can survive anything." She laughed, that same laugh I'd already memorized after 3 chance meetings and 1 midnight drive to the clinic. Short, a little surprised at itself, like she hadn't quite expected to laugh either. "Come at 6. And, Patrick—" She paused for a second, and there was more in that pause than in any sentence before it. "Bring a good appetite. It's been a long time since I've cooked anything more complicated than scrambled eggs for anyone. It's been a long time since I've gone anywhere for dinner where someone was waiting for me." I hung up and sat in the kitchen a minute longer, looking at the can of puppy food that had been sitting on the bottom shelf of the fridge for a week now. Bought just in case, on a day when there hadn't been any case yet. Now the case, it seemed, had finally arrived. Except instead of just waiting for someone to swing by on their way home from work, for the first time in a year, I was the one heading out somewhere, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Oscar looked at me from the windowsill, narrowing his eyes the exact way only he could when he suspected something was changing. "Yeah," I told him, "tomorrow we're going visiting." He yawned, like he couldn't care less. But when I pulled a clean shirt out of the closet, he hopped up on the bed next to me and watched while I ironed it. For the first time in 6 months, he'd actually come over to see what I was doing, instead of retreating to the far end of the house. Seems like even the cat understood. Something in the house had started breathing again.